Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie's wife began secretly seeing another man while claiming to be working late. He discovered her affair when she accidentally took his phone, revealing incriminating messages. He confronted her, ended the marriage, and her brothers helped her move out. Wife admitted her actions were driven by boredom in the marriage and a desire for attention from her affair partner. Now let's get into the story. When my wife and I got married, she knew I'd be making less money than her, but it never was an issue. I was and am a freelance animator, and she thought that was a cool career to pursue. After we were married for 7 years, she came into the habit of having to return back to work a few hours after she'd gotten home. She always said it was either paper that needed to be signed before submission, someone royally screwed up and she needed to fix it, or a coworker was finished with their part now so she could finish what she needed to do before the deadline the next morning. I never questioned what she told me she needed to do for work. I trusted her. We were married for 9 years. I was 36 and she was 38. This returning to work habit started when she was 36. So for 2 years at this point, this time, when she left, everything changed. When she left to go back to work, she accidentally took my phone with her. We had really similar phone cases. I heard my wife's text tone go off, which was different from mine, and I knew instantly what happened. I was about to message her by texting my phone when I saw what another person texted her. They were only programmed as initials, but they asked, "Did he let you leave the house yet?" My heart fell down to my feet and my stomach came up to my throat. I hastily replied to this person, saying, "Yep, and could you let her know she accidentally took her husband's phone with her?" This person replied by saying, "Wrong number." I called my own phone from hers and she answered it laughing, saying she realized what happened now. I told her she didn't realize everything that happened. She was confused. So I told her the text she just got. She was silent. I could hear heavy breathing while she tried to figure out what to say. She finally suggested it was the wrong number, but she probably knew I was too smart for that. I told her this number was programmed as initials. I asked her who that person was, and she was silent again. I told her she didn't need to come home again. I would have her brothers come get her stuff. She yelled in protest, but I hung up. Her brothers were going to be super disappointed in her. They were like another set of parents, but somehow worse because they were supposed to be her friends too. When I told them what happened, they both agreed to come over before my wife showed up. I scrolled through the messages as far as I could stand. This had been going on the entire time. She had this going back to work habit. She never went back to work. Every single time she went to either his house or to a venue with him and then his house. I wanted to lock her out and never see her face again, but she had a key, so I couldn't really keep her out. When she got there, I just told her to start packing. She was crying and begging me to at least let her explain. I told her she didn't need to explain anything. My heart was broken, and I knew it was her fault and what she did to cause it. She went on to say that she felt like two different people. She said she loved me deeply, but also enjoyed seeing AP. She told me she would stop if it meant we could save our marriage. I asked her how long this had been going on, even though I figured it probably had been for 2 years already. She didn't want to answer me. Instead, she just swore it would end if I gave her another chance. I told her it was over. She'd been going behind my back and sleeping with another man for far too long. Too long for me to wrap my head around. And she played me like a fiddle. Just then, her brothers arrive. I left them alone to talk while I packed my wife's clothes for her. I just wanted her out so I could start adjusting to being single again. When they finally came in to help me, they looked very upset. But not as upset as my wife. It looked like after they knew what was going on, they told her there was no way they could defend her actions. Or convince me to give her a second chance. They helped me pack quickly. She barely helped, stopping often to blow her nose and sob. I asked her why she did this, wanting to know if I was undesirable in any way. She said marriage after a while became boring and when AP showed her attention, she couldn't turn him away. I couldn't help but call her a few names at this point. I said she didn't deserve to be married to anyone because a steady relationship is a luxury for the loyal spouse. Her brothers agreed. She said she didn't like being the breadwinner either. That got me. She told me at the start of our marriage that it didn't bother her at all and she only needed me to pay a few bills. Her money would enable us to have some occasional treats and splurging. This arrangement worked extremely well as far as I could tell, for 9 years. Without the income one provided, she wouldn't have the extra money to splurge. But she didn't see it that way. She felt like her money was providing the fun and didn't look at what I was taking care of. I told her to get out now and only her brothers were welcome to come back for her stuff. They almost had to carry my wife out of the house. She was so resistant to leave. I kept telling her I didn't want to see her. I didn't believe I could trust her ever again. Finally, she left with them. I was never told where she was staying, but she did try to apologize a lot over text. I think it was just because AP was moving 8 hours away and she wasn't welcome to come with him. The affair fog was wearing off and she was realizing how badly she messed up. I got to keep our house in the divorce, but I ended up renting it back to my ex-wife. It was pretty empowering to be her landlord. She managed to pay me rent really well, but she didn't have any extra spending money. As I predicted. It's up to me if I ever want to lower or raise her rent, but for now I'm just letting it be. I started listening to music on a run every day and it is very therapeutic. I hope you all never cheat on your partner or go through something like this. It's a really terrible thing, but anyone can survive it and come out stronger emotionally. Today's second story. In this story, OP reflects on his past year, during which he divorced his wife after discovering she had been having an affair with her ex-boyfriend, Keith. He met his wife on a bus 7 years ago, and they had a seemingly happy family with 2 daughters. However, he discovered her infidelity when he found a picture of her with Keith in her car's glove compartment, leading him to uncover more evidence of their affair. He confronted them, and they separated. Now let's get into the story. Last year, I did the hardest thing I could do, and that was divorcing my wife. I can't understand why she broke up our family, so maybe I'm trying to gain that here. I know my friends would say to just get over it, but it makes my head spin sometimes. My wife was messing around with her ex, even though she was better off by leaving him. I met my wife on the bus going to work 7 years ago. She got on the bus 3 stops after me, and I would always stare at her. There were a few pretty girls that would get on the bus, but she was my favorite. One day, the bus driver had hopped out of the bus to go into a convenience store, and we just looked at each other and laughed. We talked about how weird that was, and we talked ever since. While we were riding the bus and talking, she would bring up her boyfriend Keith and always complain about him. She would always catch him cheating with the mother of his child, and he would deny it. His son's mother didn't like her, so they never really got along, and it would cause them to always be separated. I really cared about her, so I would tell her to leave since he was a clown, but she would still stay. I didn't know how to get her out of the dumb love triangle she was in. All that changed when my father gave me his SUV, when he upgraded his car with no charge. This was great, and one of the first things I wanted to do was pick her up from the bus stop. When I got the car, I started picking her up and taking her to work. Something her ex didn't do. Even though she got to work earlier, she was happy, and then I started taking her to other places just to hang out. We had so much in common, especially since she had family that lived in Guyana where I grew up. After a while, I decided to shoot my shot and told her how I felt and that she should leave her boyfriend. She tried to give me a bunch of excuses, but failed to give me a good reason to stay with him. A few days later, she called me and told me she wanted to hang out for the weekend. When I picked her up, she told me she was done with him and his situation with his child's mother. After that, we were officially dating. We dated for about 3 years before we got married. She was definitely happy to be in a relationship with me and bragged to her friends about how great I was. This made me feel good, and I thought we seemed like those funny, TikTok couples she looks at. She started talking about marriage, and I proposed soon after that. We were so in bliss after I proposed that she actually got pregnant before getting married. After getting married, we had 2 daughters and a nice home to live in. There was very little for me to complain about at the time. We were the typical family, running around after our daughters who were 5 and 3 years old and going to work. I always treated her right and I tried to balance being a good father and husband. She would do the same, although it was a challenge because our daughters were definitely a handful. One day, my cousin Anthony canceled on me because his mom was getting out of the hospital. Since he was picking her up, I decided to take my wife's car to finally get her check engine light taken care of. After walking out of the shop, I opened up her glove compartment to put the paperwork inside for later. When I opened it up, a bunch of crap fell out and I had to pick it up. While I was cleaning it up, I found a pretty recent picture of her with her ex-boyfriend, Keith. The picture surprised me because it was a picture of him locked up somewhere. In the picture with him was my wife and his sister Nadine. This surprised me because I never heard about her visiting him while he was locked up. I didn't even know he was locked up. He got a little heavier, his dreads were longer, and he was wearing glasses he didn't need. But it was definitely him. After cleaning up the mess, I drove home with a bunch of crap on my mind. I couldn't understand why she was going to meet him while he was locked up and why I wasn't told about this. It gave me a sinking suspicion about this, especially since it was so hard to get her to leave the love triangle situation she was in. When I got home, my wife was watching TV and went straight to the computer. I did a deep dive and I found out more about the situation. I knew I wasn't going to find anything on her social media, so I checked his sister Nadine's page. I found out he's been out for 3 years thanks to the pics. Looking further through Nadine's friends, there were pictures of my wife with Keith and Nadine at a couple places and parties. Seeing this got me emotional and I had to ask her about it and see what she had to say. I started up a conversation with my wife and I casually asked, "Has she heard from Keith?" She looked at me confused and said she hadn't heard from him. I couldn't believe she just lied to my face. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. When that happened, I started thinking about all the things I should have noticed that were going on. She was gone more often. She stayed up later on the phone and she avoided romantic gestures towards me. After she lied, I started snooping for some answers to catch her slipping. I took on more responsibility with the kids so that she might use her free time to make a mistake around me. After a few days, she slipped up and told him I was going to be taking my kids to see my parents. After hanging out with my kids and my parents, I called the old lady who lives next door and asked if she saw somebody come over to my house. She said she did a while ago and it was the same car it usually was. This surprised me because even our neighbor knew Keith was coming over. Even though I didn't know everything yet, I still was mad because deep down I knew what was up. When we got back, I asked her did she have any friends over and she said no and that she just took a nap. This was BS, so I was really ready to leave her. That weekend, I made up an excuse to leave the house all day. I told her I was going to take my kids to their classmate's house to play, and then I was going to see my cousin, Anthony. She was fine with it. And when that Saturday came, I took the kids to the house and waited to hang out at a close restaurant. After hanging out for 3 hours, I called her and got no answer. I called one more time and she still didn't answer and that wasn't normal for her. After that, I drove onto my street and parked at the end of it, walking back to the house. His car was there and I got mad but still held it together. We lived in a ranch-style house, so I couldn't go through the front because we didn't have an upstairs to sneak in. This meant I had to go in through the back where our kitchen was going in. And when I got to the living room, I could already hear them. Apparently, they had left the bedroom door open and when I looked inside, I was destroyed by seeing him screwing her in our bed. I just froze and I had to stop myself from being zoned out. After snapping back to reality, I went next door to see my neighbor. So when I confronted her, I had a real witness to everything. After knocking on the door, her son opened the door, which was actually better. He asked me how I was doing and I asked him if he could help me with something in the house. He asked me what it was and I said I just really need him to keep his eye on something for me. He said okay and to give him a while because he was tending to his kids. After that, I went back to my house and had to wait for about 15 minutes for him to come over. This was hard to do because I had to see and hear him banging my wife while holding up for him. When he finally came in, I told him to wait in the living room and I walked in and confronted them both. It was a real mess, and when we started shouting, our neighbor's son came in to see what was going on. When he came in, Keith thought we were going to jump him, so we hopped out the window half-dressed and my wife was embarrassed because she had nothing on but her socks. After shouting I wanted a divorce, she yelled back at me, "F you." And we just went back to my neighbor's house. I thanked him for having my back and apologized that I didn't tell him what was going on. I told him I didn't think he would come over if I told him, and he laughed and said I was right. He said he only intended to bring his kids over to see their grandmother, not all this. When night came, I left for my cousin's house to be with him and his girlfriend. While driving there, my wife called me to curse me out. I told her I did everything for her and she disrespected me in the worst way. She had claimed it was my fault. And I tricked her into marrying me and having kids. When she wanted to work it out with Keith, I told her since she regretted having my kids, then she won't have to worry about them anymore. She tried to say that's not what she meant, but I hung up on her. She can say what she wants about me. She can even say she regrets marrying me, but I won't allow her to disrespect my kids. When I got to my cousin's house, I told him everything, and him and his girlfriend never left my side even through the divorce. I think it brought us even closer. Through the divorce, I ended up getting screwed over hard because not only did I have to pay alimony and child support, but she got the kids too. Afterwards, she called me and tried to apologize for what she had said about the kids. She said she loves our daughters and doesn't regret having them. And I asked, was her love the reason she destroyed our family? She said she didn't mean to do it, but everything changed when she ran into Keith's sister Nadine. She said she ran into her while at lunch from her job, and they started to catch up. She then asked Nadine about Keith, and Nadine said he had gotten locked up. Apparently, he got stopped on a DUI, and when the cops searched the car, they found marijuana on him and his friends. Plus, they found out the police were already looking for him, so he ended up getting brought in. After hearing this, my wife felt bad, and Nadine asked her if she could help support him while he was in jail, and she agreed. After he made parole, he reconnected with her and apologized for how he treated her. And after reconnecting, the affair started for about 2 years. I knew he meant none of it, and recently I heard I was right. A friend of mine told me he ran into a friend of hers and recognized him from hanging with me and my cousin. She asked him how I was, and he said I was good. When he asked her how my ex was, she shook her head and told him she should have just stayed with me. Apparently, he was still messing around with his son's mother, so Keith was banging them both. Hearing this just made me roll my eyes, and I changed the subject. I tried to save her from this stupid love triangle, but she's still falling for the BS. It's clear he was always a clown, but after seeing what I saw, she liked being treated like another dude's side piece. She just can't seem to understand he's not going to let go of his child's mother. If you hear a girl you like talk about her ex all the time, you better run for the hills. If you hear a girl you like talk about her ex all the time, you better run for the hills.